capacity of a human resources personnel and labor relations person for the county, and I handle a lot of the issues related to human resources and personnel issues for the animal shelter. And I just wanted to make a couple comments related to some of the things that people came up to tell you about today, and maybe clarify for you some of the things that we do when we get a complaint, or some of the things that we do when issues come up related to volunteer performance or not following the direction of the shelter manager or the guidelines. Because contrary to what people might think, Jerry and other people at the county do direct us to do a full and complete investigation of various matters. And as an example, I would like to tell you about the whole issue with the guillotine doors. There was a while ago, back in late December, a complaint was put forth alleging that someone at the shelter or several people at the shelter were inappropriately banging the guillotine doors on the dog kennels. They work on ropes and you drop them, and depending on how high up you drop them, they make a considerable amount of noise. So the issue was that animal attendants were dropping the doors inappropriately, maybe not even looking for dogs who were there in the kennel area where the guillotine closes, and that dogs could be or maybe even were injured. Jerry directed me to investigate that, or to review that whole issue, taking into consideration comments and statements that volunteers had made about it, and also looking at what people at the shelter had said about the incident. So, you know, in the process of that investigation, you all are probably fairly familiar, but simply put, you talk to individuals who may have been there, you review any film that might be available. You may even go out like I did and do an on-site visit to the shelter. I had someone demonstrate to me how the doors raise up and go down, and what happens when they're dropped from a very high point. And I recorded in different scenarios so that we could review the sounds. I also researched the kennel doors to see if we had the appropriate equipment in there, or was there something we could do to improve the situation with the doors other than instructing the attendants the proper way to do it when they're handling the doors. And I found that we have the standard type of doors. There's nothing better or quieter or anything of that nature. But I also found that we didn't have a procedure in place written that advised the attendants of the importance of doing that. Common sense, I know, but we didn't have something in writing. So we prepared, and it was a formal memo advising the staff of the appropriate procedures to be followed, not just in how high you lower the doors, but also in looking for animals and trying to ensure that no one was going to get hurt. So the action that we took was, first, we implemented a policy and we put our employees on notice. If you violate this policy, you will be disciplined.
I'll take that.
That action was taken and that memo was issued, and each shelter employee was asked to sign acknowledging receipt of the policy. So be assured that if an animal attendant or anyone else at the shelter does something like that in the future, we are on track to take care of that matter in a very serious way. Secondly, the other recommendation that I made and was approved by administration to implement was that we needed to consider extending the ropes and adjusting the pulleys on the doors, because some of the ropes were fairly short and people couldn't easily let go of them or whatever, causing an unintended crash. So that process was approved, and contractors are working on the facility now, as you mentioned, on the floors. They had to remove the kennels, so when they put the kennels back, they will be extending the ropes to make it easier for the animal attendants to handle them, and that won't be an excuse for dropping the doors, okay? So those are two actions that we've implemented, an example of something that, just one example of things and how they were addressed in that particular circumstance.
Was that from a volunteer's accusation or a volunteer's?
Yes, the volunteers raised this concern and an issue at one of the meetings that was held, I believe, in December last year.
Can I
And
say
so-
something? We were all at the second meeting. Kathy Kelsey admitted at that meeting with her own mouth that the staff was purposely dropping the doors. They admitted it to her because they wanted us to know it was close to 4 o'clock. That is the truth. The lawyer was there, the Board of Health was there, we were all there, and they have an intercom system in the back. So if they wanted us out at 4, why are you going to add that stress to the dogs? That was where I was very upset. She admitted it. Now, if they're all going to lie, and you can talk to James Ferguson because his face dropped. I apologize, but it's upsetting because that's the
What
truth.
I'm pointing out to you is that
That should have
we
been
heard
dealt
the
with.
comments, we understand what Kathy said. Jerry
Okay.
directed me to look into it further and to come up with a plan if there needed to be one to enhance the situation, to preclude it from happening in the future. That's what we did. To date, I have not received or heard of any other complaints regarding the guillotine doors. And if there are, we certainly would
Well,
investigate
we don't
that
know, we're
as
not
well.
allowed in the building, but I'm just, I'm sorry.
Well,
I'm
hence
just-
walking through, you would never come across stuff. These are things, walking through. will give
Okay,
you enough,
secondly, the other point I wanted to make, in my role as a human resource person, is that it was mentioned about terminating the services of volunteers. Individuals have been released from service, and I just wanted to point out that we follow a specific procedure that allows us to give many opportunities to volunteers when they do something that is in violation of the volunteer handbook. Certainly, we would talk to them about it, make sure they understand what the process is. That could happen on several times on different violations of the policy. Then they would be given a form of written counseling, and hopefully that would eliminate the behavior, or they would now understand that that was not acceptable. Then they would get a final warning, letting them know that the behavior has continued and hasn't improved, and therefore the next step would be your release from service. So we try to give every opportunity to volunteers who are not complying with the procedures to be in compliance with them. The fact of the matter is that many volunteers may not agree with what our guidelines are. But we put them in place for good reasons, for the safety of the shelter and the safety of the people that work there and the animals, as well as the volunteers. We're not making up rules just for the sake of making up rules. And that's how the process works. We also have an appeal process where a volunteer who is terminated from service can appeal the situation in writing. We would look at it again and make a decision as to whether to allow that volunteer back into the program or not.
May I ask a
So that's
question?
the way that process works.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
How many, I'm Jeanette Genza, I have a home
Your name?
in Linwood. How many volunteers are there now at the shelter?
Kathy, can you speak to that? Because I'm not, day to day it changes.
Yeah, it does change. Let's say we just had an orientation. I have the schedule right here. I know there's at least 6 new volunteers. There
New?
are 6 cat socializers. And, well, I'll be perfectly honest, of the 2 new dog walkers that we implemented, they asked not to be scheduled with the former volunteers, so they left the program because they didn't want to be harassed.
What's the total number of volunteers? What's the total number of volunteers?
14.
14.
And what's the average longevity of a volunteer?
Some of them live years.
It varies with the individual.
How many are with dogs?
Okay.
How many are with dogs?
So, Chairman, if I may, before the
Yes.
closed session, you made a comment.
just hired.
Just for my clarification. You indicated that if a volunteer has been let go, and they have the right to, at least, they can appeal
Yes.
their removal, you would review. My question would be to you, have any of the volunteers who've been let go appealed their removal yet?
Yes, one.
One out of the 4 or 5 has been speaking to that?
No one else has been dismissed. There's no evidence. Just so you know, I just can't, I'll be, okay, go ahead, I apologize. I apologize.
Sit down. I'm asking a question because I'm trying to get to something. I've heard 2 or 3 of you get to this mic today and said they have been removed from their service. You're indicating that only one
since the implementation of the volunteer handbook, one person has been removed from service. Several others have received oral counseling and written warnings, but they are still out volunteering with the program. They have not reached the point where they've been released. I believe the one lady you
Maybe I
might
don't
be
understand
referring
English
to
language that
was
good, but I
released
thought a
many
few-
years ago. I'm just not sure I remember her name.
Mary.
but Mary. I think that was far in the past. Am I correct in that? Because I don't know Mary.
December.
2014.
In
December.
2014?
Yes.
So I'm not familiar with that
Oh.
circumstance.
Maybe I just, and I'm done. Again, maybe I just misunderstood, I don't understand English language. But I thought a few of the ladies said they have been removed from their services at the shelter as volunteers. I could have misunderstood that. You're telling me only one has
That's
been
correct, sir.
removed.
That's correct.
So maybe I missed something in all this conversation.
Am I allowed
And
to?
the point I'm making
No.
is that if that's the case, if the other ladies have not technically been removed, they can be one or two things. Either put back on the list for volunteering to continue to on the list as volunteer, or if they believe they have been removed, they can appeal.
Yes. If they were removed, they would have received written notification of that.
Can I ask you a question later then? Because
After the meeting, please.
Okay. I have a question too.
Very
you
excellent
don't wanna
presentation.